Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. Hello, everyone. You are listening to the MC Lars podcast. This is episode 117. It is Wednesday, March 3rd, 2021. It's crazy to think that we've been in lockdown for a year now almost. March 21st is the anniversary of The Graduate. That record will be 15 years old, which is crazy. That album opened a lot of doors. I'm sure a lot of you listening found me from that era of my discography. And so it's always an interesting time of the year when I think about how much I enjoy still doing music, still doing these other projects. This podcast started September 2018. I brought it back after like a long hiatus. I first started it 2006-ish and then took a break and brought it back. And it's been a lot of fun. So it's a lot of milestones right now. My first show as MC Lars was March 10th, I think, or 11th of 2000. So 21 years of doing this. It's crazy. Episode 117. This episode is with Ceschi Ramos, who is a musician I met. We crossed paths briefly on the last show of my tour with MC Chris, Megaran, and Adam WarRock in 2011. We both played the Knitting Factory in Brooklyn. I think it was called Luna Lounge then, or maybe it was Knitting Factory. I don't know. But we met for a second. And we played on South by Southwest showcases together, a bunch of different stuff. We both played Alias's memorial show in Manhattan a few years ago. And we kind of kept in touch. And so I asked him if he'd be on the podcast. We did the podcast remotely, obviously. But we realized we both lived in Oakland in the Bay Area at the same time. And we had shared memories about hip-hop, the fire, the earthquake, all this stuff, and the Simpsons. So that was tight talking to him. I am doing my Lars Wars series on Patreon, patreon.com/MCLars. Shout out to the Patreon Larsens who make this happen. Shout out to the new ones, Matthew, David, and Corey. I appreciate y'all signing up. Thank you so much. It means a lot to me. And shout out to the old ones, John, Colin, and Christina. This episode is brought to you by them. We have the Empire Strikes Back song dropping soon, which is unarguably, the best of all the Star Wars movies. You might disagree, but that movie is just amazing. One of the best movies of all time, actually. And so I'm dropping my song about that shortly. And then A Caravan of Courage, an Ewok adventure, which is another Star Wars movie, which isn't so lauded. So sign up if you want to check out my Lars Wars songs. I did my holiday special track, which I think came out pretty well. So I'm having a lot of fun with it. Thanks to everyone who's been watching our Four-Eyed Horseman shows. Oh my goodness. Like, y'all keep coming and watching and supporting. We have the best fans in the world. I'm sorry. I can't deny it. Y'all are so generous, and it's fun to keep performing even though we can't tour right now. And I appreciate y'all. So the next one is March 27th. It's with Frontalot, Megaran, Schaefer the Dark Lord, and a surprise opener. So I'll be posting more about that. So now it's time for the question of the week. I asked a question on social media. The Larsens drop knowledge just like Wikipedia. To think about this or that, let me guess. These are the messages that some of y'all left.
Please leave a message after the tone.
All right, so since this podcast is now monthly, it used to be weekly, I didn't give much time for y'all to call in and answer this, but I was amazed by how quickly, in just like a day or two, people called in. So maybe that's what I'll do. I'll announce the question closer to the podcast release time. Our first caller is from Ryan in Columbus, Ohio.
I really wish I could answer that question, but I've never seen The Simpsons. I've never, ever watched The Simpsons. Okay. Have a good day.
Wow, huge. I don't know if you're serious, but I feel like you may be. But for someone who's so funny and knows a lot about popular culture, I am a little surprised. But that's okay. What was I going to say? Sometimes there are people who have never seen The Simpsons, never seen Star Wars. And at this point, that's kind of like a badge of honor. But I'm sure there's enough about the culture you can absorb through osmosis. Like, I'm sure you could tell me who Bart is. What the dad's name is, right? So thanks for calling in, huge, aka Ryan. Okay, now we got Rico calling from Kentucky.
This is the Rico calling from Kentucky area. My favorite Simpsons character is Hans Mole Man because I can't get that Mole Man, Hans Mole Man, can't keep Hans Mole Man down song out of my head. And that's about the most I know about The Simpsons. So, spread joy, combat misery, And remember, the Rico loves you. Cheer!
Cheer! Rico, you have a beautiful singing voice. Hans Moleman is my favorite character too. Thank you for calling in. I'm currently doing my master's right now in instructional science and technology. And one of the people we're studying this week is Bandura, who is a psychologist who believed in the social learning theory. And I think about that, how like stuff like going, cheer, and all the weird things I do, when people do them back to me, it makes me think of Bandura and how we learn from each other, or we teach each other ways to interact with the world consciously or not. But that message made my day. Thanks, homie. Next, we got a call from Ray up in Salem, Oregon.
What up, man? This is Ray from Salem, Softtown, Oregon. My favorite Simpsons character is actually the town of Springfield. And hear me out here. It is the only character that has been in pretty much every episode of the show. It is a dynamic character. We like certain things about it from back in the day, and we like things they've changed to it. We don't like certain things they've changed to it. And it's also one of the only characters that's taken for granted. It might be a town, but every one of our favorite characters interacts with Springfield in a unique way that ties them to the other character. So I hope that wasn't too made of an answer, but I'm a big fan of Springfield in the town, and being from Oregon, we got our own Springfield, so I'm going to dip out that way and enjoy a walk. Take it easy.
Ray, that was tight as heck. Great creative answer. Now, a location, I guess I wouldn't call a character, but I guess you could say it's a location, but it's an integral part of the show. So therefore, it is important. You took that question and you spinned it and made it unique. Now, I was thinking about this the other day. Matt Groening grew up in Oregon, right? And went to Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington. But all the streets in Portland, a lot of them are names of characters on The Simpsons. So Springfield is named after Springfield, Oregon, even though the show never specifically says. I think that's a very good point you made, Ray, and I appreciate you calling. Okay, now we got Michael from up in Rochester. Michael, who's your favorite Simpsons character?
Hey, this is Michael from Rochester, New York, and my favorite character on The Simpsons is Disco Stew. But he don't advertise, man.
Thank you, Michael. That was great. And I appreciate you keeping it short. You know, I was thinking in 2017, I was going to do a whole record about the lesser known characters from The Simpsons. I wanted to do a Disco Stew song, make it a disco song, obviously. And that project never materialized. But, you know, the characters do stay evergreen. And I think that would be an interesting premise for an album. I did the Notes from Toontown record. So I was going to do Notes from Springfield. I was going to do a Harry Potter one called Notes from Hogwarts. And I want to do one about the Prydain Chronicles, Notes from Prydain, which is what the Disney movie The Black Cauldron is inspired by. So, you know, there's always a ton of stuff to do. I also want to do a bunch of LPs about authors like Shakespeare. I want to do a Poe LP, a Melville LP. So that's what's up. There's a lot going on that I want to do in this life. Will I do it? We'll see. Who's to know? But one thing that I need to do is not be like Disco Stew, and I need to advertise these projects. Okay, next we got Rick from Grand Junction, Colorado.
Hey, Lars, this is Rick from Grand Junction, Colorado. Initially, I wanted to say Jessica Lovejoy. You know, she was perfectly played by Meryl Streep. She's too much of a one-off character. That being said, I'm really a big fan of Jasper because he perfectly encapsulates old senility, the futile fight against, you know, maintaining our youth. The dude just forgets everything, is aloof, has nothing but contempt for the young, is of course bewildered by the new. I think Jasper represents an element in us that, you know, we should embrace getting old and, you know, the challenges that come with it. That being said, what a time to be alive, 2021. Shout out, man.
Yo, Rick, shout out back to you. Thanks for calling in. That was a good answer. Yeah, the Lovejoy daughter is a great character. We didn't see much of her, but that's a great one. But Jasper is an amazing character, and I love him. And you know who he's boys with? Hans Moleman. That's what's up. Okay, we got one last call. This call is from Darion in Citrus Heights, California.
What's up, Andrew? It's Darion, and I'm calling from Citrus Heights, California. And I think my favorite character is definitely Hans Moleman. This man is incredible. He was born in 1921, probably one of the oldest characters. He was once the mayor of Springfield. Just like me as a DJ, he was on a morning radio show, K-Jazz FM, I believe. He introduced himself as, "This is Mole Man in the morning. Good morning, good Mole Man to you." And he's had multiple jobs in the series, as well as died multiple times and always seems to come back. The guy is freaking practically blind, but seems to be in the worst case scenarios ever. This guy is incredible. I love Hans Mole Man. And good to see you too, man. Peace out.
Darian, thanks for calling in. That dude went to church with me, and Darian made a lot of hilarious prank calls. He may or may not have. That's the rumor, allegedly. And he was a DJ whose brother, Thesaurus, is a famous battle rapper. Anyway, Darian, that was tight you called in. I actually texted him I was going to play him the message, and he had never heard my Hans Moleman song. So I sent him a link to the video because, it's tight that people I grew up with independently love Hans Moleman, and people from the Bay freaking love The Simpsons. People around the world love The Simpsons, but on this interview with Ceschi, we're going to talk about how The Simpsons Sing the Blues was our first CD, both of us, how, hip hop and punk rock were inspirational in a similar way, and just basically what it's been like to stay sane during COVID. So I really enjoyed this interview. So let's jump right into it. This is my interview with the legendary Ceschi Ramos. Hello, everyone. You are listening to the MC Lars podcast. I'm talking remotely to Ceschi, and this is a man I've known about for a long time. We reconnected at the benefit for Alias a few years ago, and this man makes great videos. He has a really good live show. He is one of the geniuses behind Fake 4, and he's been killing it for a minute, so it's an honor to have him on the show. How you been, man? How you doing?
Thanks for having me, Lars. I've been all right. Just hanging in there, trying to create during these times.
Yeah, are you still in Connecticut, or where are you these days?
Yeah, when the quarantine, when lockdown started, I was actually in LA, so I was out there for about 4 months, and then drove all the way back to New Haven. I have an apartment here in New Haven with my roommate Mo. But I've mostly been staying with my family, so at my mother's. So it's sort of like reverting back to childhood in a lot of ways.
So how long did it take you to drive from LA back to the East Coast?
I did a pretty monstrous. I didn't really stop much other than for gas, and I was ultra careful, just doing the whole like gloved up, masked up, like everything.
Yeah,
just so I went straight through. I drove long hours every day, so it took me 3 days.
Wow. And did you really sleep at all, or did you just nap a little bit, or?
Yeah, I slept. I noticed that the Hilton. I don't want to like promote the Hilton brand on here, but the Hilton brand is really good about cleanliness and their procedures for COVID. They had some sort of deal with Lysol or whatever. So they were I ended up staying at Hilton's, and I had some points from tour, so it worked out.
Did you go through like Denver, or did you go through Texas, or?
Yeah, I went through Denver. I did I think it's I-80 East all the way. Yeah, pretty much that was it. And I've done that so many fucking times, I can't even tell you. So
that's crazy. So you got back, and so you're staying with your family because I'm sure they need help, and you want to be there for them, or is it like what was the impetus for that? You're just looking after them?
I'm really close with my family, and they are extremely cautious because my niece and my mother both have medical conditions that we have to be very cautious around. So the least I don't really get out of here much. I'm pretty much here, and I don't really see too many people. And I do go to the apartment occasionally, maybe once a week, sometimes twice a week. But mostly I'm just being extremely cautious and hanging out with my immediate family.
You can look at this situation in one of two ways, right? Because you and I and anyone listening who's a road dog knows that being on tour is like a rush and it's a way to make money and it's fulfilling and satisfying, but it also can feel like a bit of a hamster wheel sometimes. And for often I'd be like, man, I wish I could just take a year off and work on something I really believe
Yeah,
in. And
definitely.
right. Have you ever had that thought?
Oh, very, very much so. I've had those thoughts all the time, and I'll always book like, only 20 more shows, only 30 more. I'll just like book my ass off and just book my entire year before it's done. And I realized that was never really going to happen. So this kind of forced me into that space. And it's odd because it hasn't been the most creative time for me. It's been a really difficult time. I've sort of I don't know. I have big ambitions and I have big projects on my mind, but for me to actually finish something has become a challenge.
I can relate, man. Do you feel, so I'm wondering if you feel like it's kind of stultifying being like your music is very passionate and full of this live energy. So is it hard to be like shouting in a mic knowing your family's in the other room or?
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah. That's really difficult. So one thing I did do during this time is that I started renting a studio with like 6 other people. And so I get 1 day a week there. And it's just a place for me to get really loud and be alone and record collaborations, which I'm really, really bad about getting done, to be honest. I'm a really terrible procrastinator. And yeah, so it's an outlet for me.
Yeah.
Having this studio in New Haven. It's like an old factory building. Nobody's really there. It's pretty huge and empty, and I could just be loud as I want, and it's a great situation.
Wow, that sounds like a lifeline. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, just getting away also from. I feel like since I came back, I'm rarely alone, and it's kind of strange because at the end of my time in LA, I was actually alone quite a bit, and I was getting really used to being in my room and just kind of not going anywhere, and now I'm surrounded by my loud family and dogs, and and so it's a big shift.
So are you the type of artist who feels more inspired when you're like by yourself in LA with your thoughts and maybe your guitar, or are you someone who feels inspired by trying to steal away moments to work when you're around like chaos?
More often than not, I'm just a very distracted person. I'm an easily distracted person. So for me, I probably won't get something done if there's too much noise around or if I don't have a deadline or something like that, So more often than not, if I'm alone and I can focus on something or I have a guitar around, I'll make something. It's more common.
Did you have any tours that you had to cancel or anything, or how did
Yeah.
let's talk about that.
So the whole thing was, I had this spot in LA with my manager, and the lease was running out. So I had my last tour was in March, and these were tours that they were how I was paying the bills. I needed to do them. And so my last tour ended early March, maybe the first weekend of March, something like that. And then I think the weeks after it, I had a bunch of spot dates in major cities like Chicago, Philly, New York, places like that, and New Haven. And what I was gonna do was go back, basically pack whatever I had in LA and do a driving tour all the way up into Canada, all the way up the West Coast, all the way into Canada, and then all the way to Connecticut eventually. And so all of those shows I set up, and that whole studio time I set up in Canada, because I work with Factor Chandelier in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. He's my producer. And so that was part of the trip I had planned. All of that got canceled. And then my first extensive UK tour got canceled too. So all of that at once. And yeah, so what ended up happening is that our lease was pushed back to June. It was originally going to end in April. So I ended up staying there almost all of March, April, May, and finally left in June. I mean, it worked out, but yeah, at that time, especially, it was such a shock that the landlord was fairly cool about it. And we just really had nowhere to go. So that's pretty much how it happened. And yeah. So yeah, I got a lot of stuff got canceled though. Yeah.
I've been talking on the podcast to artists when they are thinking they'll be safe to want to tour again. Like, are you looking into 2021 further into the year? Or are you kind of waiting? Like, what's your business plan with that?
I'm waiting, man, because I don't know. I feel I don't want to come up with a date or estimate. I've already tried to do that a couple times and it just didn't work. So I'm just going to wait until we have more of a solid time. I do have a rough date for my next album release though, and I'll probably stick to that, and that'll be November 2021. And I told myself I wouldn't put it out until I could tour, but more than likely I'm going to put out my next album in November 2021.
Is it done, or are you still working on it?
At one point in time, I thought it was actually done, and this is last year, and I was actually going to put it out, and now it's just become this monstrosity of a 4-part prog rap folk punk album. I don't even know what the fuck it is, and I'm still figuring that out, to be honest. So yeah, it's basically like a double album, but each side is almost like a part in itself.
How did you discover punk rock, and like how did growing up in New Haven influence your relationship to that subculture?
I have kind of a curious upbringing, and I didn't actually totally grow up in New Haven. So I moved to New Haven when I was 13.
Okay.
But I lived my childhood. I lived a lot of places growing up, but the majority of my childhood was spent in Berkeley, California. So punk rock. I learned about. I actually look back sometimes. I have little notebooks that I used to draw in when I was like 7, 8 years old, and there would be punk rockers drawn inside of that. So I knew about punk rock really young, and that was like something I would notice just around Berkeley. And eventually I went to the Gilman Street Club, 924 Gilman, which I've luckily been able to play at a lot in my older age, in more recent years. But also I should say my cousin's 10 years older than me, and he was a punk drummer since I was like 6 years old, you know? So he's mostly a thrash metal drummer, but he got me knowing about that whole world of underground music. And as soon as I moved to Connecticut, he was inviting me. He's always been like a DIY kind of metal dude, hardcore punk dude, whatever. And he was inviting me to underground hardcore shows or metal shows. And so I remember going to this club as my first year in Connecticut, I remember going to a club called the Tune In, and that's where eventually I used to just hang out. No matter what genre was there, I'd go there every weekend and hang out and go to shows. So a lot of it was punk. If it wasn't punk music, it was the punk subculture. You know what I'm saying? Like it could have been a ska show or a hardcore show, or even a hip hop show once in a while. But it always had this kind of like DIY ethic to it, and this sort of, it was part of this punk subculture.
I don't know if you knew this. I actually grew up in Montclair, and I was born in Alta Bates in Berkeley.
Oh, crazy! Yeah, of course, in Alta Bates. Yeah, 1989, we ended up in Berkeley.
Yeah.
Yeah, that changed that really built a lot of the influences I still have. You know, I think about where we grow up and how that influences our art and I was listening to Public Enemy by the time I was 9, you know. I was listening to, I was going to the Ashby Flea Market and buying cassette tapes of whatever I can get my hands on, which was mostly just the dirtiest rap I could find. So it's like, I remember Ice Cube Kill at Will was one of those tapes. I remember I would just get like bootlegs of 2 Live Crew and NWA shit. And yeah, I mean, it's a big reason why I rapped. It's just because of where I grew up and lived in that neighborhood.
You know, and that's the cool thing about the Bay, especially that period. Like you had, the thrash stuff coming out, like Primus and all that. But also, it wasn't so weird to be listening to Too Short and Operation Ivy on the same car trip, or you'd hear on Ashby, you'd hear a car drive by playing E40 or something, and then you'd hear Minor Threat. Like it all was an amalgamation, which didn't feel that disjunct. And it's interesting. I realize now the Bay is special in that way because music was kind of like separated, I don't know, along, you could say racial lines or cultural lines outside of that. I mean, of course there are diverse cities, but the Bay was special in that it didn't seem weird. Would you agree? Or
I completely agree. It felt really normal.
Yeah.
To me. And I think being the age I was, I just didn't think about it. All of it was really cool older people shit to me. Because I literally remember meeting Too Short. I remember I used to go to this is funny, but I used to go to Lake Merritt for sailing camp, which is really,
that's tight.
There was a inner city sailing camp thing that we would do, and I met Too Short there when I was little. He was just happened to be walking around there, and I was a fan. I was a fan of what he was doing, and I was a fan of Metallica, and Metallica's from the Bay too. We can't forget the Bay was, exactly as you said, it was also a big thrash place. So I found out about a lot of thrash metal that my cousin also loved, and Op Ivy and that whole scene. Green Day, we can't forget Green Day.
Right.
Billy Joe actually lived across the street from my school for some time, so there was
that's tight.
And I had chances to meet him, or I've definitely seen him in person, and I had already become really I was so underground and cool that I didn't think he was cool anymore at certain point. But yeah, I mean, it was really an amalgamation of all these cultures, and it was all together. And it's funny looking back at my little notebooks of drawings and journals, how that formed me, because actually where I was in Berkeley, it was the line of Oakland. So if you know where the Ashby Flea Market is, I lived blocks away from there. And where we were, especially during the time when we were there, my school was like 90% black, So for me, my reason for rapping was all from going to school there, and my friends there getting me into that. And and just fucking around and rapping. I didn't really think much of it. I don't remember why I rapped, other than it was just a thing that we did for fun, you know. And when I heard the metal and punk shit, I thought it was all kind of cool and we're just like little kids figuring this shit out. I thought it was abrasive and rude and things I liked, like
Yeah.
like they had bad language, or it's just kind of stuff to like piss our parents off or whatever.
So you were there during the 89 earthquake and the 91 fire, right?
I was.
Both of those.
Yes, both
Me
of them.
too.
And they both had
Yeah.
major impact on my life. I think about them way more than I probably should. But yeah, I was there. And I was a big Oakland A's fan. So for
Me too.
And I was a big Jose Canseco fan specifically. So I Bash Brothers era, 1989 earthquake. I'll never forget that day, man. I remember because we were playing. I really, really wanted to watch the World Series game that day, and I think we were going to go to Laval's Pizza, if you remember that place.
Yeah, totally.
And that's like where kids would go. There's video games and shitty pizza, but like, pizza that tasted great to a kid, because whatever, shitty pizza is good pizza too. But, but yeah, that's where we were going to go watch the game there after soccer practice. I played soccer, and I remember there's this big cement wall right near our soccer field, and it started just shaking. Like it looked like it was about to fall on top of 30 kids. And I'll never forget that moment, and I'll never forget coming back to our little apartment where we lived on Oregon Street, and everything in the apartment, everything was just on the ground, like, bookshelves, everything just thrown around. And then the fires, the fire of 1991 fire.
Yeah.
I remember biking with, I remember that day very specifically too, because it just looks so crazy. And now I think people, because they've been seeing the fires in California on TV and how the sky looks so crazy, they can maybe get an idea of it. But I had never seen anything like that at that time. And watching the hills burning down and the entire sky turn gray with this bright orange sun behind it, and this sort of, I don't know, it was such a apocalyptic feeling. I just remember biking, and it was a little bit chilly, and just seeing this under this gray day. I was just biking with one of my best friends in LeConte Elementary School, which is a school that's on Oregon Street, and you probably know Berkeley pretty well. And it's between Shattuck and Telegraph, basically.
People have theorized that the 89 earthquake is the reason why the A's won, because the Giants were in the lead in that game that got canceled, right? And they had a momentum of a winning streak, and that if the earthquake hadn't happened, the A's would have lost. Have you heard that theory?
No, because I'm a diehard A's fan, and I'll never believe that. No, but that's possible. To me, in my mind, as an 8-year-old or whatever I was at that time, the A's were unstoppable,
Right.
So that was, and it's pretty much the only baseball team I've ever really liked. So,
I remember the story of like some of them helping bring lemonade and water to the firemen who were trying to help people get out from under the Cypress Freeway. Do you remember hearing about that? Like the A's players during their downtime were there helping the firemen. I was like, these people are heroes.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't remember that story specifically, but that's awesome. I guess another thing I should mention is like MC Hammer. And I think maybe part of the reason I liked MC Hammer so much was because of his connection to the A's.
Right.
And he was a bat boy for the A's, right? So that's kind of how he came up. And I remember being in third grade, and we would have breaks and listen to Hammer in the classroom. I mean, rap was a big part of our just every day. You know what I mean? It was just that era of just, a lot of like Black Power stuff, Malcolm X shirts everywhere, and it was just a big part of my upbringing.
And the bootleg Simpsons, Black Bart Simpson, like that was huge.
Yes, Simpsons too. The Simpsons came out that same exact time. That's when the Simpsons. Pretty sure '89 is when the Simpsons came out as its own series after the Tracy Ullman show. Yeah, and that was a big influence too. So
it's crazy. But MC Lars was that's a shout out to MC Hammer. Of course, MC is everywhere, but he was the first rapper I really loved, and like that's a nod to my Oakland origin.
That's amazing. I love that. I really love that. I love that we have this kind of shared childhood history. That's dope. I loved Hammer too. He wasn't the first rapper I loved because I actually discovered the Fat Boys, and being a fat kid myself, I was just like, I love these guys, and I remember watching them on MTV with. I didn't even have MTV. I was dog sitting for a neighbor, and he had MTV on, and the Fat Boys had a video with the Beach Boys. It's like Kokomo or something like that, but it was like a remix of Kokomo. I don't know, but they had a song together, and I thought it was the coolest thing. And I was probably like 5 years old.
Yeah.
Or something. So that was the first rapping I really heard, and and then not to get all into the childhood shit, but I had an uncle here on the East Coast that for I think my sixth birthday or so, maybe 7th birthday, gifted me a Casio keyboard SK5, I think it was, which is a sampling. It's a miniature sampling keyboard. And I started fucking around and making songs on it, basically, and recording it into a Fisher Price tape deck. And raps just happened. You know what I mean? They just happened. It was a very natural thing. Around this time that we're all talking about, around the earthquake, Hammer time, and the A's, that's when I first started rapping, was around the same time as the earthquake. And
during the Oakland Hills fire, we evacuated out to Livermore to stay with my mom's parents, my grandparents. And I remember the Simpsons Sing the Blues, like would do the Bartman and stuff. I'd listen to that, and it made me feel less scared because we were up in the hills, and like our house was a block away from being burned. We were lucky to be near the fire station up there. So like we came back, and like our neighbors, it was crazy, dude. You go a block. And so I remember we were scared because we didn't know. And so that learning the song was like learning the album was a therapeutic way to get through that. So it's weird talking about it now, but you can relate like how this idea that the earth might shake the ground underneath you and destroy your house. Your house might be gone in a minute, but we'll always have music, and we'll always have like self-expression. And that is something that's intangible but transcends all this, and it's resonating with the energy of the Bay, like those three things. I've never chopped it up with an artist who can feel me on that, but like it's
oh, I feel you so heavily. And that album specifically was the first that's the first CD I ever got.
Yo, me too.
My mother, I had tapes before that, but my mother, she one Christmas or whatever, she surprised us with a boombox with a CD player, and Simpsons Sing the Blues was the first CD she gave us.
Oh my God.
So that's I feel that so deeply, and I remember thinking about the Bay Bridge a lot at that time, and how cars were falling through the hole in the Bay. I mean, it was this really frightening moment, just thinking about death a lot and really being confronted with that at an early age. It was actually kind of traumatic, I think, probably for a lot of people that grew up during that era there.
I did a record where it's called the Zombie Dinosaur album, and it's a zombie T-Rex with an A's hat tearing up the Golden Gate Bridge. But I just
I think I saw that. Yeah,
and
I love that image. Yeah,
thanks, man.
great.
That was inspired by the Bay Bridge collapsing, and the way the physics of the bridge are dangling between his giant arms was like referenced on that. It's kind of dark, but it was my way of channeling that. And of course, he's the A's hat with the Golden Gate. It's like a diss to the San Francisco, sort of, but
eventually, I should note that eventually a man that he's pretty much like an uncle to me, and he still sells cactus at the Berkeley flea market.
Oh, wow.
He's my friend Derek's father. I'm sorry, he's my friend Carlos's father. His name is Derek, and he's still the cactus man at the Ashby flea market, but he brought us to a Giants game, and we saw the Grateful Dead sing the national anthem at a Giants game once.
That's awesome. That's a very Bay Area moment.
It's a very, very. This is maybe like a year before Jerry Garcia died too.
Wow. I remember when Jerry Garcia died, we were up at Tahoe, and this chronicle, the cover story was that he died. It was like the headline news. I was like, oh, I had never put it together that they were just so regionally revered there, that the death of I've never seen the death of a musician on the front page of a newspaper. I was like, wow, that was.
Oh yeah,
that was crazy.
That's big in the Bay Area. Yeah, I remember that was a sad day for Derek because I should also say that we moved to Connecticut, to New Haven, with my mother when my parents got officially divorced. But I would go back to the Bay because my father ended up staying in Berkeley and Oakland till just recently. So we go back to the Bay every summer and visit him. And so Jerry Garcia died during one of those summer, I believe it was a summer or spring break where we were visiting. And I remember my friend Carlos's father just like in tears and making a shitload of guacamole that day.
Yeah.
That was like his entire day. It was, he had seen like 260 Dead shows, you know what I mean?
Wow. So. That was the, I had a friend whose mom was really into the Dead, and they'd have all these fresh bootlegs, and I started getting very interested in like the legalities of taping shows and this whole idea of the pre-file sharing, where they were like endorsing like the Dick's Picks stuff, like endorsing the, right. And I thought that was interesting because like I learned a lot about audio from listening to these different tapes and how she rated them and how they were recorded and like the difference between holding a tape recorder and the crowd. And so that was cool on a technical level. Like, and plus I thought,
definitely.
That was a cool, like kind of, I guess populist, or I don't know the right way to say it, a way of giving music back to the fans and letting the fans own it. And that's kind of punk in a way, maybe you could say, in a way.
Yeah, I remember Derek had just like those huge cassette cases, they could fit like 100 cassettes in it, and they would just be full of bootlegs and and he would just tell me about each show, and I never really got into that music or understood it, but there was something about the culture that I always really appreciated.
Let's fast forward. So you came east, and I guess I don't want to skip over too much, but I'd love to talk about the genesis of Fake 4. I know you've probably talked about this a lot in interviews, but what led you to that, and the benefits of, for people listening, of how to building community in this age of like really siloed, creative process, like how that's benefited, like if you don't mind speaking about that.
Yeah, no, I don't mind. It's actually a great time to answer that question too, because I feel like 2008 when I started Fake 4, at least in my life, it was a very similar year to this one. And that sounds strange, but for me, I was in LA. I was basically living in LA. I was in a band called Toca, and we had been working on this project for at this point, probably close to 5 years. And we had a development deal with Snoop Dogg's management team in
Wow.
LA. And it was this whole crazy kind of thrown into Hollywood experience. And we were figuring it out. We were in our 20s, figuring this shit out. And we came from this very DIY background, and we didn't, especially at the time, I didn't really like anyone telling me what to do with my music. I was like all about, we looked at ourselves as sort of like a Mr. Bungle meets Project Blowed hip hop band, So we were just not on some mainstream shit, but we were signed by some people that really were all about the money, and we were getting that experience, thrown into that experience firsthand. And so the band actually, just to make a long story short, the band ended up breaking up right around the time when the record came out. And my grandmother got very sick, and my brother and I moved back to New Haven to live in their house with them and take care of them, of my grandparents. And so that was 2007 into 2008. So the Toka record came out in 2007. The band broke up. All the buzz that we had built and all that shit in LA was just kind of done. And we moved back in, my brother in his early 20s. I was, 26. My brother 24, and we moved back in with our grandparents out here, and basically nursed my grandmother back to health till she could walk and eat again on her own, and live somewhat normally after being overdosed by a nurse who didn't understand her because she didn't speak English properly. So it was this whole crazy situation. At that point, my brother was just like completely kind of out on music. He had been named one of the top 10 progressive drummers in Modern Drummer magazine during that month when we moved back. Like, we literally got the Modern Drummer magazine. It's like a big deal for drummers or whatever. And that same month, he was like, all right, basically I'm stopping music. The band's done. I'm just gonna take care of my grandmother. But he had a solo record. He had a solo record that was finished, and it was largely inspired by like K Records and more like experimental indie folk kind of stuff, and a lot more of the left field hip hop stuff as well. Super melodic, and we wanted an outlet for it, and so just for that to come out, I decided I wanted to start some kind of label. I started calling around other people I knew. I started, I talked to the label that put out my first two records, which was a label based out of Ohio, and they were originally called Beyond Space Entertainment. Then they were called Net 31. And then they changed their name to Squid's Eye, and they became solely a Dayton, Ohio local label. They told me, we love this stuff. We want to help you out, but we're a Dayton, Ohio label. We will distribute and manufacture this for you, though. So I kind of had that. I had that going for me, and then there was another label of our that we basically helped our friends create in California called Grim Image, and they wanted, the owner of Grim Image wanted to help us kickstart my brother's album as well, and financially backed the first project. So we were able to do all the things that we weren't able to do in LA with our band. In LA, we really wanted to work with like a college radio promoter and, you know, certain publicists and do things our own way in circles that we knew would work. And the label kind of didn't really let us go there. So we had made some connections in LA and basically put them to work and tried it out. And that's how the label started. We wanted a home for our family's music, for my brother, myself, and any of our friends. And then it just grew and grew and grew and became what it is. It's 12 years later now. So that was 2008.
Yeah, like distribution you needed that, really. I mean, TuneCore was new and everything, like having
physical distribution. Yeah. We had this kind of lucky, I feel like we had this kind of lucky break early on, where we had collaborated with folks like from Anticon and the Shapeshifters and Project Blow, just from being fans and reaching out to them, or having mutual friends, or they were just interested in the music we were making because it was quite different from even what they were making, you know? So, so early on, we started making these connections, and the reason I was able to get a distribution deal right when Fake 4 was working is because we had kind of this minor cult status already because of records that we had done in the some years before. So in 2004 and 2006, I had released a couple of records, and in 2001, one of my bands released a record that was distributed by 6 Months Distribution, which was Anticon's distribution company. So all of that sort of helped a lot, you know, saying that, like, I never really believe people when they say it's always DIY, you know,
right.
It's always like do it together, and it's always somebody's always helping you up. And yeah, you might put a ton of work in it, but we help each other out. And so, yeah, in some ways we were really lucky to be connected to the sort of scene, the left field, progressive, underground hip hop scene that we were connected to. And that's sort of what led to our initial distribution. Having those names being attached to, you know, having some notoriety in the names helped us get other distribution deals. I was able to kind of cold call and get a Canadian distribution deal on my own through a company called Sonic Onion. And that was one of our first like wins as a label as well. And it sort of just went from there. Eventually we signed an international distribution deal with Red Eye USA, and they're the biggest indie distributor in the world, I think.
Wow.
So,
that's awesome. That's huge.
of course, physical distribution started becoming less and less important, but at the time, as you said, at the time, it was extremely important.
Nowadays, what are the benefits of like the collective, and how do you balance your time managing the label versus making your own music and focusing on your own art?
That's a good question. So, at first, when we first started the label was my number one art project. I had kind of put my own art aside in many ways. I was doing everything. I had made the original little website. I was doing all the design. I was booking tours for the artists, dealing with the distributor, doing layouts for everything, shipping everything myself as well. And over time, you know, it grew, and I realized I was sort of abandoning my art. And so I started getting help bit by bit. The earliest bit of help came with Cars and Trains, my friend Tom, when he first started doing the web design for us. Then eventually other friends started helping me ship because the orders were getting bigger and bigger, and art layout. My friend Michael Krigler, Time introduced me to Michael Krigler. So we were building the team bit by bit, and at some point I started hiring label managers. The first label manager was John Wagner, who was the drummer of Soul and the Skyrider band. So so we and then Jeep Ward, who is now working for Red Eye, our distribution company, and now Dylan Owen. If you know Dylan Owen he's an artist out of New York, and he's doing very well in his own art, but he's been our most recent label manager. So I actually decided at some point to pay someone to do the label management so I could focus more on my own art.
Now that it's got legs and has reputations, you've been able to kind of delegate to people.
Yeah. So, I'm not saying that's easy, and a lot of times it's very complicated. Sometimes we're just barely keeping our head above the water. It depends. There are times when I've definitely thought we were going to go bankrupt or got stuck in predatory loans. Somehow we've made it work. I'd say a year ago, was some of the most stressful times of my career. About a year ago, after I had a really busy and incredible year. By the end of that year, it felt like too much to keep together, So in some weird ways, this year has forced me to scale things back, and I already was planning on scaling things back in some ways, but it's made it more necessary to scale back and find other outlets, find other ways to pivot and get other sources of income. Our friend Nikki, who handles a lot of our social media stuff, she was the one who decided to create a Twitch channel. That's become like a whole another creative outlet for the label, and that's been a really cool thing on its own. So I don't know, it's just kind of taking it year by year. That this industry changes so often that you sort of have to be flexible and expect things to change.
All the chaos of growing up, during a time when there was the Bay Area was always changing, that you have to somehow have the inner strength and belief in your own music and ability to write songs and perform that drives everything, because the machine is not going to carry that. It's the other way around. And so you just have to be flexible and have people around you that I don't know, that motivate you, that you trust. And I think that's what's so hard about COVID, is that these networks are really being tested. And we've been blessed with the nerdcore community that we've been able to do these streams and put stuff out and stuff. And but not being able to tour is hard. And so it's crazy that I would have loved to have talked to you in real life and do this podcast in real life, but it's you do what you got to do. Right. And how do you find that strength in yourself and inspiration to anyone listening? Cause I think that's a good note to end on. Cause I feel like you're someone in the industry a lot of people see as this dude made a name for himself, has an amazing show, and is a respectable guy with a great community. And I'm just saying that as is that pressure to maintain that? And how do you drive yourself to keep getting better and better once you've achieved all this? You know what I mean?
It's yeah. And one thing I really respect about the nerdcore community is that you're so tight knit, and it's one of the most supportive communities I've ever seen and experienced since I've been able to play shows with my friends like Michael Kill and Mega Ran, and I've been able to see Samus. I've been able to see bits and pieces of that, and I really respect that a lot. But yeah, we have Fake 4 has built a really specific community as well, and it's a very supportive community. Emotionally, I think a lot of us are there for each other. A lot of us are very open about our struggles with mental health issues. We're just we're really there for each other in that way. Sometimes I can't lie, it's really difficult for me to stay positive and stay creative and stay active um when I'm not on the road and I don't have immediate goals. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It really is difficult. Well, one of the things, as I mentioned before, one of the things that keeps me fairly active is booking these Twitch performances, because we do these Fake for Friday Twitch performances, and one of the things I've really looked forward to is booking artists on there every Friday. It's kind of like going to a show every Friday for me, and sometimes I perform and do these live stream things. At first, they were really, really uncomfortable for me. I really didn't feel comfortable just playing to a camera and not really getting to interact with anybody. But I got used to it, and other things I've been doing during this time, I've been doing a lot of writing outside of songwriting. So I've been doing. We started a Fake Four writing group. My friend Bree, is a poet out of Austin, Texas. She started it, and we basically get on Zoom and read poetry and prose, and then do free writes for 20 minutes. And we do that every other week. I've been doing other long form writing things, just kind of challenging myself in ways that I hadn't before. I look at it as exercise and therapy at once. So, and I've also been doing therapy every week, which I can't. That's been crucial for me. All of it on FaceTime, and plenty of technical difficulties and bullshit, but all of that's been crucial. I've sort of been, one of the main things I've been doing is filling up my weeks with just accountability practices. Like my friend Kaim and I will get on the phone for 20 minutes on Mondays or whatever, and maybe we'll be like, all right, now I'm going to do 20 push-ups.
Yeah.
All right, we'll do 20 push-ups. I'm going to write a poem. I'm going to do a flyer for this podcast that I'm making, whatever, It's like we figure something out to do and push ourselves and hold each other accountable, and it's exactly for the reason that you mentioned. It's that it's harder right now we're not seeing each other face to face. So these are ways for us to check ourselves and keep ourselves active. So those are some of the exercises I've been doing.
The difference between being the performer you and the authentic true you, and then how that gets murky when there's money and business and just dealing with all this stuff that ever since I was a kid, like, just when I'm performing, what happens, how people respond to me versus when I'm performing versus when I'm like my true self. And I think it's been a lot of breakthroughs, honestly, through all this in that realm, personally.
I don't think I was home for more than 2 weeks at a time last year.
Wow, man.
It was intense. And so I did start therapy out of necessity, mostly because my depression had gotten to the scary point. And so I started, and I got insurance a year ago, November 2019. I got it back up, and it was actually my roommate who called and made the initial appointment for me with this woman. So after I had kind of like a manic breakdown and all this shit happened, and in a weird way, pandemics, that she wasn't able to do she wasn't able to charge my insurance for FaceTime or virtual sessions. So it was only pandemic that's allowed me to do these sessions all the way out in California. So she was able to charge my insurance and keep things going weekly. And in some weird ways, pandemic has led to a lot of healthy lifestyle changes for me. So I'm thankful in some ways. In other ways, I really can't wait for it to get back to normal, you know?
Yeah. And I was thinking today that through the past 5 years, or maybe 10, as social media and everything has made like human connections and the value of art and communication so mercurial and maybe devalued and so separated and siloed, there's now this realization that like behind, the people we follow or the people we're connected to are these actual human beings where like you're doing the fake for Twitch Friday shows and everything. Like there's this ability for us to reinvest in our humanity and our friendships and our connections in a way that will transcend. And I hope beyond just a vestigial way, transfer into the next year. I hope when things get normal that these online connections and these communities and these shows will in a way keep going. Like I hope the good things.
Yeah.
Do you feel me? Do you ever think about that?
I think about it all the time. And it's also one of the most curious things that's happened during this time is that if I feel like people are more approachable in some ways, some people that there's no way you could have ever talked to or shared a stage with. Like I've shared a virtual stage with some of my heroes, musical heroes that I never thought that would ever happen. It's such an odd thing that this pandemic has brought us closer together in certain ways. At the same time, and I do love that we've kind of created new communities out of it because of this situation. At the same time, I've also found that I have to take major breaks from social media. That it'll just drive me insane. Just I have it's just when you expect that instantaneous. When you have expectations at all, I've learned that expectations are really not good to have. My motto for the year, it might be my mantra from now on, is no expectations. I think goals are good. I think dreams are good. I think all that. I need those things in my life. I need those to keep me on track. But expecting anything is never good. And one problem with social media, in my opinion, is that you begin to build expectations for yourself and for others. And because of the formats and because of the instantaneous gratification that it brings. And so I've definitely had to check myself when I get too wrapped up in my phone or screens, because it's so easy to do during this time to just be completely engulfed. I would say that at the moment I need to figure out a break right now. I need a break from screens right now. I've been stuck in this mode where my attention span is so minimal that I'll start, maybe trying to watch a film or something and be like, get to the fucking point, and I'll just like turn it off because I just have this tiny shitty attention span that needs instant gratification. And so so at moments like that, I think we need little dopamine breaks or whatever, resets. And I'm gonna get back on that tip and start just taking walks without my phone and taking breaks from my phone and erasing apps and doing things like that, which I have been doing throughout the course of this year, and it's been helpful for a reset.
A book I read, man, like I totally relate to you on that. I read this book. My friend Brian, he's in a band called I Fight Dragons, and he reads a lot of books. And do you know them? They're pretty dope.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. He put me onto this Cal Newport, and it's called Digital Minimalism. And I read the physical book, and it's just awesome, dude, because it's about he takes you through a 30-day thing of how to do those things you're talking about. And I took a break this summer, and part of it was because when our son was born, it was exhausting to be constantly online. But I recommend that book, man. Have you heard of him? Have you ever read Cal Newport?
No, I haven't. I'll definitely check it out because I'm interested in that stuff for sure.
It's cool. And he goes into the science of it. And like you described, like the instant gratification. And it's a funny transition because the next thing I was going to ask you is where people can follow you on social media.
I feel like we've gotten to this. I don't know. I never know what to say when people ask me that anymore because people pick and choose which social media platforms they use more than others, right? If they look up Ceschi, Ceschi on any platform, I'll be there. Other than TikTok, I never signed up for that one. I don't think. Yeah, Ceschi or Ceschi Ramos, my last name.
Cool.
But yeah, if you look up Ceschi, you'll find me.
That's what's up. I thought it would be tight to end with electrocardiograms. I like to drop songs by my guests, unless there's another song you want to promote. But I really do love that song. I'm curious, would this be a good one to go out on?
Yeah, that's not that. I love that one too. I'm glad you like it. Some people, it's one of those funny ones where sometimes it rubs people the wrong way. It's like a little bit abrasive for some people, but I felt like that was a really important addition to the album for that reason. So I'm glad that you like it.
Electrocardiographs, and the video for this is dope. And yeah, man. Well, I've always, for years I've known about you. It's always been cool when I've gotten to see you. Thank you, man. This has been honestly pretty an inspiring, fun episode. So thank you.
Thank you, homie. Yeah, it was great chat. And then I loved that we got to bond on some Bay shit. That's so funny.
That's tight.
I appreciate that a lot.
Catholic schoolboys rule, 9 fingers to the sun. Happy you're woke, I woke up fully clothed and broke as fuck. So repressed that I cringe when British folks say the word cunt. Systemically made us felons so we would never hold their guns. Only higher shooters, never been to Hooters. If this was Los Angeles in 92, I'd be a looter. Kanye sends dick pics, I send dog pics. How the hell am I 36 and so fucking defiant? Swam back to the trap, notice most trap rappers are clients. Like clockwork, our country's blessed and obsessed with ultra violence. Working in the drug world, you see a lot of grown men crying. I was actually born in July, most these guys are Leos lying. Touch a lot of dollars, all of it I owe to others. Never wanted to fuck with crack after I saw it fuck my father. This life has a lot to offer. Sweet poisonous kisses from the lips of priests or devil's daughters. Precious vixen mistresses quick to spit the venom instinct for several sicknesses. Severing heads with liquid sedative sentiment slide like sedimentary mud. These fuckers won't take me alive but touch what I've done. Then I'm breaking my prime and I'm too fat to run, so I'll die. Holy fuck, like the body of Christ inside of a nun's cunt. No, that's too much. You're supposed to pose as a poet, not grow into another punch-drunk punk. Today I'm overthinking of a population that voted for Trump. Of the one time in junior high when a little boy called me skunk. Because he saw my skin was light but I wasn't white enough. Thought English wasn't my mother tongue cause my family was Puerto Rican. Suburban Connecticut kids laughed at a name that sounded foreign. Never quite fit in with the other ones on the teacher's attendance list. In California when I was 11 they asked me to talk Mexican. Got so sick of explaining that eventually I just said yes, that's fine. Everything is a test, everything falls in line. Like flat ones and electrocardiographs when we die. Everything is a test, eye against eye. In the meantime, use those brains to redefine that life. Everything is a test, everything falls in line. Like flat ones and electrocardiographs when we die. Everything is a test, everything falls in line. Like flat ones and electrocardiographs when we die.
Some artists are just so unique and passionate and original, and you feel lucky to know them, and you feel grateful that they exist in this world. And without being too hyperbolic, Ceschi is one of those people. So shout out to you, man. Thank you for being on the show. Next month, we have another awesome rapper, Ritz from Strange Music, who I've known almost 10 years. Almost 10 years. He was on the Indie Rocket Science mixtape, and he's always been mad cool to me. I mean, he's just a great, cool dude. So that is next month. That podcast will be up Wednesday, April 7th. So check that out. We'll see you then. And in the meantime, hope to see you at the Four-Eyed Horseman concert later this month. That will be on March 27th. Love y'all. Thanks a lot. Peace.